I don't know. You wanna kick us off? How you feeling with Piper?
So I'm looking at these starting talents. This is one of the issues with Pied Piper. The thing is, his starting talents aren't bad. One of them's pretty bad, but Sound Barrier, pretty good. It's a good support talent. It's good for getting shield. It's a pretty good shield talent. It's really easy to proc, and it gives you some armor. Again, in co-op, this can be pretty good. Virtuoso, pretty good. More attack speed. That will synergize with quite a few things in the kit. More movement speed on your power and attack as well can let you just stay in attack and maybe back up faster than an enemy can walk towards you. But there's Freezing Trap here, where special enemies within Special's area effect are chilled and take 10% more damage. That is almost always the pick because it's good in every single build. More damage in the zone that you already want to kite enemies around and keep them in is very good. And in co-op, you are now just putting a zone of, hey, everyone stop what you're doing and attack what's in the zone because it's way more beneficial to what you were previously doing. I think it's tough. And one of the reasons that it's tough is the last talent I didn't mention, Explosive Rats. You're like, oh, I want to do a rat build. Let me take Explosive Rats. Freezing Trap is the better talent to take in your rat build.
Yeah. Well, what is it? Let's see. What's the ability that makes it where the rats don't die inside of the special? Is that
Stimulant Vibes.
stimulant vibes? Yeah. So it just kind of feels like the rat build is forced into your special anyway. And yeah, explosive rats is just kind of this sad outlier in this group that just doesn't have a place in the game right now.
What I really, really like what they did for the rat build, and I think it might have been the last talent that they added to the game, or close to the last talent for Pied Piper, is they added Forstando, which special triggers an implosive defense pulling enemies inward, which is really nice because if you have stimulant vibes, you're going to pull all these enemies inside. But the benefit that you also get from this is he has the talent Invasive Blast, which is he has Horde to spawn one more rat when he spawns rats, but Invasive Blast lets you spawn rats instantly on your defense. And with Forsando on your special, with the rat build, you want multiple charges of your special because of stimulant vibes, and you want to be able to cycle those and keep your rats alive. And if you have Forsando, every time you use it, your special, you're going to be spawning these rats. So I think like in my mind, the rat build comes down to having stimulant vibes for Sando and invasive blast. Past that, like yes, you want to pick up the other rat talents, but those are like the core three to make sure you have like damage time up all the time in the rat build. If you don't have those, I think the rat build feels really, really bad. I think once you have those, you're like, okay, cool, I can, like death by 1,000 cuts, just chip everything down.
That's fun too, because like you're saying, the rat build was pretty memey, and now it feels like it's maybe not the best build, but it is actually a valid build now. And I think that the Rat King is a fun like flavor. Again, it's a level 10 talent, so those aren't the most impactful as you're building up, but it's interesting in terms of adding a visual, adding another incentive around how you baby and take care of your rats and how you prioritize and manage them. So I really like what they've done to make rat build a thing. The only real problem is explosive rats. If we did something a little bit more interesting with explosive rats, I think that we would see a lot more of. I think we would see a lot more rat build in general.
Yeah, I think Rat build gets it's the probably the most loved and most hated build in the game. People go like, this build is pointless, and there's so many people that just stand by it and they go, no, this is like the best way to play Pied Piper. It's not the best way to play Pied Piper, but it is potentially the best way to play Pied Piper. I did a defensive build, and it was on stream. It was a meme build. I said I'm gonna try to take a defensive talent focus. One of the benefits of rats is when it comes to camps and bosses and stuff. Again, what I was saying about cycling your specials with stimulant vibes, your damage time is up all the time. If you're running away and someone's in that special and your rats are attacking, you are constantly doing damage. I hit over like 1.2 million on a rat build and was blown away, but in a boss fight, when you're running away from the boss or, like say the tentacle phase, if your rats are just constantly on the boss and you have enough specials and special cooldown to keep them there, you might be able to just kill the boss before you kill the tentacles, even if you're the one focusing them, because your rats aren't attacking all the time. I feel like explosive rats really, really need something to be a premier rat talent. One idea I had was you now spawn your rats on like a shorter cooldown, however long it takes to spawn rats. I think it's like 18 seconds or something. It might be shorter than that. It might be 15. Like upgrade that as well and cut that down to like 10 seconds you spawn rats. Tough part about that is Invasive Blast kind of takes care of that. So I don't really know what it needs, but I think there needs to be either a bunch of damage added to explosive rats to make it worth having your rats die instead of stimulant vibes, or just something like, I don't know, maybe your rats can trigger an explosion after a certain amount of bites. and that way you can keep them alive.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that'd be interesting too, because then you'd open up two different rat builds. Because currently the rat build is a big sustain. Like you just put up your stimulant vibe special and let them do their work. If we wanted to add another rat build that revolves around cycling rats, letting rats die and then repopulating them really quickly. That'd be really cool. Like make explosive rats enable that. That would, I don't know. I would love to see more diversity in our rat builds.
Mhm. I think you can even play with potentially a long-term bonus. This might get out of hand, but if it's a talent that just scales itself, as we don't have a talent like this, so maybe we wouldn't see something like this in the game ever. But like every rat that dies, you get 0.01% damage to your rat's damage. And so it does become about don't take stimulant vibes, do this rat build without it, keep take invasive blast and a bunch of defense charges and Versando, keep on cycling them, let them die and try to build up their damage that way. Again, that might be too overpowered by the end of the game if you can really, really manage that. But I don't know. I think something like that would also be cool.
I also really like the idea of talents that, because I know that it's tricky when you have a talent that if you pick it up, it will actually make your build worse.
Mhm.
We don't see a ton of these in the game. I think that also when you just have two talents offered per level up, it's tough if one of those could potentially screw your build. But I like the idea of having talents in the game that situationally can mess up your build. We have a couple, but we don't have. Usually speaking, your talents are going to add something to your game without taking anything away. They're always a net positive. It just might not be one that you actually actively take advantage of. I think that having some that revolve around really deep understanding of the character can be positive as long as the player has the opportunity to recognize that and there are different play styles that they enable. I think that is a cool choice that is interesting from a player perspective, provided again you're not actually forced into a build that is awful, right? The game doesn't make you choose the thing that's going to screw up your build.
No, I agree with that. I think it is cool when there are some talents like that one build it's going to be the most necessary thing, and another build you're like, no, please stay away from me. I don't need this. I think going into some of his other builds, one of the things with this character is like we just talked about Carmilla as well, but he's a character that has a drastic change from day and night, which is cool because this game was advertised like that a lot, and not every character has something like that. So it's cool when someone does. He gets piercing notes during nighttime. They go through enemies. During daytime, they don't. During daytime, his notes do a little bit more damage, and this is why a lot of people probably think Pied Piper feels bad. I think Pied Piper is one of the strongest characters in the game, but in the daytime, when you start out and you can only attack one enemy at a time, it feels really slow. And I feel like the more game knowledge you have, the better Pied Piper becomes because you realize what camps you want to stay away from. Like you don't want to do ghoul camps in the daytime. You really want to have your nighttime piercing notes. Like pig camps are great for him in the day, and you also in the daytime really want to focus down one enemy. Like he has his power that has spread, like a shotgun spread in the day. You really want to get right up close to that enemy and make sure you're hitting them with every single note in that shotgun spread, and just try to take care of one thing at a time. I also feel like a lot of people don't like him because if at night you see his piercing notes, it becomes a lot more about understanding kiting enemies in this game and trying to line them up and make sure you are taking full advantage of the piercing notes. If you have a camp of 5 enemies and you're only hitting 1 or 2 at a time, the camp's going to take a lot longer. If you can line them up and make sure you're hitting 4 to 5 at a time, you're going to be like, wow, this guy actually does a lot of damage. He takes care of everything right away.
Yeah, it's also interesting when you are in a boss fight and it switches from night to day. You
Mm.
might notice all of a sudden, like you go through the first phase and you do a ton of damage, and then you go into the second phase and you're like, why is my damage so much lower? It's because of the difference between day and night. And so it's funny because you'll notice that more in some situations. I think the boss fights is one of those places where it stands out. But isn't I think that when we talked before, you said that Piper is one of the best dash synergies in the game.
I think Pied Piper might have the best dash build in the game because of his talents and how they stack up with dash. So spinning solo, power triggered after dash makes the hero move quicker and has a 40% crit chance. At legendary, this is 70%. Most dash talents, say Scarlet's double strike, very, very good talent. After you dash, you attack. There's no other way to benefit this in her kit besides like white attacks. You have Fan of Spikes, but that's like a completely different source of damage. But like white attacks will make that a longer range and deal more damage. But Pied Piper has spinning solo. He has extra measure and he has quintuplets. He has three things that you can, oh, and sniper, which does more damage at a longer range. He has these four things that can all stack into that one original spinning solo to make it deal more damage. You don't need to take dash charges or dash cooldown. You do want Eternal Rose, but if you get 7 link boots and you have multiple power charges, you can dash power, dash power, dash power, get all those bonuses from Eternal Rose as well, have this insane crit chance, therefore making you have an insane crit damage. And yeah, this build kind of just deletes things in the game. I think for me, this is the quickest boss kill I've ever had. One of the benefits of it is you also get to take crit damage out of grimoires every single time. You don't need to focus crit chance if you get the Eternal Roses to match up there. But I think, again, that's like Pied Piper has so many strongest builds in the game that I think this is arguably the strongest for boss damage and arguably the strongest dash build in the game. I mean, Beowulf is a big competitor right now with Fireball, but no, I love this playstyle and this build, especially because it's, to me, the best build with 7 link boots.
Yeah, and it's again like it's cool because the character does have a kind of a tricky and intricate start. Like getting Pied Piper out the gate, you're going to have to be aware of, okay, I don't take a ghoul camp right away. Pigs are good. You have to be aware of this. And there is some challenge because if you get the wrong talents early, it can really mess up your scaling as well. But once you get into it, I like the ceiling. Like having a tricky threshold early with a character that has a really high ceiling is, I think, inherently good because it's challenging, but the reward payoff is so high. I really like that in a psychological sense for the player base. So really big fan of that. And then if you're not, because I think that the dash build that you're describing has a really high ceiling, but I think that it is a little bit tricky because you're using your dash for damage, so you're not using it as an escape. And if you're going into a lot of Eternal Roses, you probably don't get to take quite as much survivability. So I think that it's going to have a really high ceiling. It might be hard to get started. If you're a new player coming into the game and you're trying out Pied Piper, probably just go Fortissimo, so special build. Freezing Trap, and then what's it? Let's see, is it Grand Finale that gives you the explosive AoE?
Yes.
And then Chorus, yeah, and then you can just you put these specials up everywhere, and everything's really slow because of the freezing, the shield effect from Freezing Trap, and you just play around that. It's really good at clearing camps. It's really good at being able to play safely. I feel like Virtuoso and Freezing Trap are interesting to contrast because Virtuoso has a really cool ceiling, right? Because you have increased attack speed. It's one of your main damage dealers. But Freezing Trap is going to make your play a lot easier to pull off because you're so much faster than the things you're fighting.
No, I agree with that. I think what you're saying as well is taking Chorus. Chorus is a cool talent as well because it's on your special, but you can upgrade it by taking Ace of Spades and getting more attack damage and buffing your attack things. You can also take low notes and buff your own attack that way, but it changes your chorus notes into low notes. It does make them pulse less often, but is still worth it. These are both talents that you really want at Legendary. Some talents, you don't really care. Like for Sando, it just makes the range of the special bigger, which is good, but you don't really need that at Legendary. It's not as important. Chorus and low notes are amazing together. They were nerfed heavily with, again, the amount of pulses that happen on a chorus when you take low notes, but it is still one of the best things to do in the game. And low notes, whether it be day or night, whether you take Virtuoso and you want that attack speed or not, it is probably one of his best talents to take for two reasons. Daytime, it gives you AoE on your base attack, so those school camps now become a lot easier to handle because you can hit multiple enemies, and you really want to make sure you're taking advantage of that in the day. But at nighttime, when you hit with a regular note at nighttime and say there's 4 enemies lined up and they're right on top of each other, that note will hit each enemy once. With low notes, it's like a bigger AoE that triggers around the enemy. So the note will hit the first enemy, the damage from that note will hit the second enemy as well. Then the note hits the second enemy, triggers again, hits the first, second, and third enemy. Then it hits the third, hits the second, third, and fourth enemy. So low notes, if you just stack a bunch of enemies on top of each other, becomes an insane burst of damage. Like you'll notice if you're attacking one enemy at a time and then a bunch group up and you're attacking them, you'll just kill everything in that group. So low notes is one of the best talents, I think, in the game, just as a base where increasing your attack.
Yeah, low notes is really cool, and I feel like it's appropriate, right? It's a really, really strong talent, and yet I'm not saying that because I think it should be nerfed. I think it's really fun. I think and cool. And there's some skill, there's some game knowledge here as well about how it works. And that's why sometimes Pipers can just melt stacks of enemies. So I'm a big fan of those. I guess we haven't really talked about the other ultimate. So you can also go for Unchained Melody instead of Plague of Rats, because we talked about the rat build before. Unchained Melody is one of the trickier ultimates to get value out of, I think, in the game. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I'm looking at it and I'm in disbelief that it's a 90-second cooldown as well. Because, I mean, it's funny because most of the time I played Pied Piper and I take Unchained Melody. I never use it. I maybe use it once, like at level 5 or during a boss after I've expended all my charges of everything. You take Unchained Melody for a dash build to get Jig at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of cool how we talked about Carmilla, though. There is one thing, I guess two things that actually scale the ultimate. One of them being Sniper. So your notes will shoot, they'll have a longer range and deal more damage if they hit after halfway. So you can actually buff the ultimate with this. And then Unchained Melody also sends out ghost notes, which is cool. It's I don't know. It sends out a lot of notes, so you'll get a lot of ghost notes coming from it. And if you have a high attack damage, then your ghost notes can be doing a lot here. But it's probably the most underwhelming ultimate in the game. It gives you forced movement. A lot of times this puts you in bad scenarios. You also can't cancel it. So if you ever use it at the end of a camp and you want to go pick up a chest, you might just be dancing for like 5 seconds before you can pick it up.
Yeah, it's a pretty rough one. Like I feel like Pied Piper has a bad tendency with that ultimate to just, I don't know, just like ride his rocket pack right into a mob or to a big AoE. And so it's like it's definitely interesting. I see what they're going for. In theory, it seems like it should be good because you can kite away from enemies and flunk at them from afar. But its range really isn't far long enough to keep you safe. And in a boss fight, obviously, the whole arena is in some degree of danger at all times. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I think there's the last thing to mention on Pied Piper is though I think he's actually a pretty good healer. We look at Melusine to be the healer, but he has perfect harmony, which is 4 health to all nearby heroes for up to 4 enemies hit. That triggers on your defense, but it also triggers on Forsando. And normally with Forsando, you're running into a group and trying to pull them all into the center. So that's a pretty big heal. And then if you are going rat build, it's every 20 attacks made on enemies, your rats will restore some health. Again, what I was saying about cycling rats is you can play some specials and make sure they live forever with stimulant vibes, and you could heal from a distance and very, very frequently, especially if you have Horde and Rat King, because your rats they attack twice as much, so they attack faster and stuff. No, they don't attack faster. They just live for twice as long. But you can get a lot of heals just from a distance off with Pied Piper. So he's one of the safer healers as well. I just wanted to put that out there.
That's a good point too. Like I personally, since I play solo so much, I don't think as much about the group talents. So I think that's a great perspective that we can benefit from, that I can benefit from, because I guess that I play multiplayer now. But yeah, I like Piper. I don't have too many things that I would want to be different about him. Maybe his ultimate, maybe make that somehow a little bit more consistent or easier to get out. Maybe add some value to explosive rats, but by and large, cool character.
Mm-hmm.